Hello, I'm Graham Phillips. Welcome to the vodcast for ABC TV's Catalyst, Australia's premier science program, with all the latest stories from around the world and here at home. You can download more vodcasts at abc.net.au/TV/video. And don't forget to watch Catalyst each Thursday night at 8 on ABC TV. See you then. Tonight on Catalyst, hunting humpbacks off the coast of Queensland.
I'm in the middle of the humpback highway, where for the first time we're trying to find out how much of our pollution ends up in the whale.
Dr. Norman Swan checks out the benefits of eating Mediterranean style.
But what in fact is good for us in the Mediterranean diet?
And new research looks at the difference between autism and Asperger's. Hello, welcome to Catalyst. You'd think the world's polar regions would be among the cleanest places on Earth, but they may not be as pristine as you imagine. A nasty residue of toxic pollutants from all around the world is building up there. They're called persistent organic pollutants. And to assess their levels in Antarctica, scientists are studying creatures at the very bottom and top of the marine food chain, namely krill and humpback whales. Mark Horstman went to the centre of the Humpback Highway just off North Stradbroke Island to join the scientific whale hunters on the toxic trail.
Of all the continents, Antarctica is the coldest, the driest, the highest, the windiest, and the brightest. And as the only landmass with hardly any people, you'd expect that it's also the cleanest. For the Southern Hemisphere's population of humpback whales to remain healthy, Antarctica needs to be free of chemical pollution.
The main concern is the diffuse sort of toxic effect it has in just compromising the immune system and therefore making the humpback whales as more vulnerable to fighting disease.
But new research is revealing that humpback whales are contaminated by toxins that can only come from their staple diet of krill. In terms of biomass, the Antarctic krill is arguably the most successful animal species on the planet. A few years ago, Susan Benson-Nash analysed several thousand of them to see what they might contain.
We started with krill being the keystone species of the Antarctic, meaning that if you remove the krill, you're also effectively removing other species. So it made sense to really start with krill, find out what's in krill, and thereby you can see what predators are exposed to as well.
She found more than 100 different forms of chemicals known as persistent organic pollutants, or POPs for short. They're organochlorine pesticides like DDT, or industrial chemicals like PCBs and dioxins. Many were banned decades ago, but are so long-lived they continue to persist today. The problem is that persistent organic pollutants aren't broken down by water. Instead, they dissolve in the body fat of animals.
They're very lipophilic, so fat-loving. So if they do make it into the food web, they can accumulate in our bodies.
But how do these synthetic chemicals end up in remote Antarctica, far away from agriculture and industry? Let's say we dump a load of DDT onto our imaginary planet here. Now, it's long-lived and a volatile chemical, so over decades it evaporates out into the atmosphere. And it only comes back down again when it hits a colder temperature and condenses out of the air. That's how these chemicals move around the world, bouncing from a warm climate down to a colder climate. But of course, once they're down here, it's a one-way trip. There's no going back. That's why persistent organic pollutants end up concentrating at the poles.
Assuming that an air mass has deposited some DDT out of the atmosphere onto the ice, perhaps, Then in the summer when the ice melts, it would either be taken up by herbivores such as the krill or else deposit to the seabed.
And after krill?
After krill, you've got everything else in the Antarctic. Pretty much everything depends directly or indirectly on the krill.
In the feeding areas around Antarctica, each humpback whale gulps 2 tons of krill every day. As winter sets in, they head north from the ice cap, travelling to warmer waters to give birth and mate. One migration route tracks along the east coast of Australia on the way to North Queensland. This is the Humpback Highway off North Stradbroke Island, where more than 8,000 whales pass every year.
Here he is. Look at this. A humpback whale in the middle of its journey from Antarctica up here and all the way back down again. That's fantastic. It takes 7 months, that journey. This is really exciting. Here it comes again. It's the longest migration, one of the longest migrations of any mammal. But what amazes me most is that they do it all on an empty stomach. They rely entirely on their fat reserves.
Susan and her colleague Courtney are the first to investigate the chemical burden in humpbacks as they swim 10,000 kilometres without eating.
Mike, come up again. Let's hear it. Okay, let it go.
Somewhere between about 4 to 11 kilometres an hour they tend to be travelling.
They aim to get 30 samples of blubber and the chemicals inside at a time when the whales are most vulnerable to any toxic effects.
They're just drawing on the fat reserves that they've built up in the summer. And with that mobilisation of fat, you're going to get mobilisation of these contaminants. So all these contaminants that may have been locked away and dormant are now circulating in the bloodstream and can reach their target sites of toxicity.
It takes a fair bit of skill, a lot of luck, and a specialised dart gun to take a small plug of blubber from the heaving flank of a speeding whale.
Court, let's shoot on the right because of the lighting.
Okay, hopefully they're going to come up somewhere on our right side. You can often see them under the water just before they surface, so you've got quite a lot of time to line up the shot.
The biopsy darts cause no harm to the humpbacks, unlike the research methods of Japanese whalers.
The biopsy dart, don't forget the diameter of it is the same as some human biopsies. And you look at that in a 15-metre humpback whale, it's not really that intrusive.
We've got a whale ahead. Yep, about 100 metres just in front of the boat, 2 whales.
While Susan and Courtney target the top of the food chain in sunny Queensland, down in Hobart, another member of their team tests krill in a refrigerated shipping container.
Hello, Catalyst calling.
Hi Mark, welcome to my little lab.
Environmental toxicologist Anita Polson works in a constant temperature of 0 degrees. Like a little slice of Antarctica in here.
Yeah, you could say that.
What are you doing with your krill here?
I'm looking at DDE. DDE is the most stable metabolite or breakdown product of DDT, and it is still in use in some countries. This is an algae solution that I've contaminated with DDE. I'll add this to the beakers and the krill will be feeding on the algae as they would do in the wild.
DDE is a major contaminant that builds up in wild krill over their lifetime of 6 years or more. To measure that toxic effect in the lab, Anita simulates the exposure with high doses over a short time.
We find DDE in an average concentration of 2 to 4 nanograms per gram or 2 to 4 parts per billion.
That doesn't sound like much.
No, it's not a lot, but it is comparable to levels that we see in the Arctic.
Organochlorines like DDE are carcinogenic neurotoxins that alter how animals move and disrupt their reproduction.
Let's have a look. What do you think?
Well, there's much less activity than there was before.
Yeah, and you can see that we've got at least 3 out of 5 krill that are very, very dark red. They've become immobile. Sometimes they'll be doing a few tail flicks.
It's evidence that the toxins impair the schooling behaviour of krill, a key feature of their biology. If they were exhibiting this kind of behaviour in the wild, what would happen to them?
That would be a major problem because they are schooling animals, and in the wild it would have dramatic consequences for the survival of the species.
And in an ecosystem based on billions of tiny krill, all the Antarctic species they support are also at risk, especially the massive whales. Back on the Humpback Highway in Queensland, following the toxic trail isn't easy. First, you have to find the right whale.
Oh, there's a calf. There's a calf. Mother and calf. We don't want a mother and calf. Obviously, we don't shoot calves. We want mainly males.
Then you have to avoid the tourists.
We're doing whale research. Can we ask you to stay outside 100 metres? Okay. Cheers.
Then get close enough to be covered in whale spit. After doing this every day for 4 weeks, Susan and Courtney are a precision team of gun-toting boaties.
Yes! Nice shot, Susan!
Nice shooting. I got the net.
Got a sample!
Was that the kind of sample you hoped to get?
Yep, so we can see this one went in at a little bit of an angle.
Right.
And the skin is quite thick, and then we get a little bit of blubber.
It's in the white fat where the contaminants accumulate.
We just keep thinking what an ambitious thing it is we're trying to do. You have to see the whale, you have to track the whale, then you have to shoot, and your equipment has to work, and then you have to retrieve the sample. So there's a lot of things that have to come together.
They've only got 1 dart left for sampling in the northward migration.
Oh, okay, the first one surfacing here. We'll go for him. I think he's going under the boat.
He's coming up on our right. He's coming up.
He's coming. Okay, that's a sample.
And that's it.
That's it for the season.
That's it for the season.
28.
28.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So the real work starts now.
Yes.
The fun bit's over.
Yeah, so this is field work and then there's the lab work.
It's still early days for their research, but preliminary results show the level of DDE in the whales is 18 times greater than in the krill. But the toxic trail doesn't end there. People are part of the Antarctic food chain too, eating whale meat or taking krill oil. No longer can we assume that Antarctica is pristine and clean. In the whales is a warning that our chemical pollution knows no boundaries.
It's long been thought that Asperger's syndrome is a milder form of autism. Now, people with both these conditions have more trouble interacting with other people, and also they can cause language problems. But I recently caught up with a Melbourne researcher who thinks that autism and Asperger's are quite separate, and you can tell by watching the way people walk. For most of us, walking is something we take for granted. We just decide to walk and off we go. But it's not always that easy. When there's a problem with your walk, with your gait as it's called, it may not necessarily be an issue with your bones, your muscles or your nerves. The problem could be the way the information is processed deep within the brain.
Off you go.
Movement studies of patients with Parkinson's disease have helped reveal how gait is controlled by a complex interplay of conscious thought and automatic functions in ancient parts of the brain. In a healthy brain, when we want to walk, the motor cortex, the part of the brain that makes the conscious decision to move, sends a signal to an ancient part of the brain, the basal ganglia. This is where the movement is controlled automatically. So once the motor cortex says, say, walk at 1 metre a second, the basal ganglia take over and make that happen with no need for further conscious intervention. Indeed, that walking pace continues until the consciousness kicks back in again and says either walk faster, slower or stop. Until there's a problem. In Parkinson's disease, the amount of the brain chemical dopamine is reduced and the circuits in the basal ganglia that regulate movement are altered. This means the brain's automatic speed control no longer works, causing the person to think they are walking much faster than they actually are. When a patient's gait is analysed, it shows the effect falling dopamine levels have on the basal ganglia and on movement.
And remember those big steps while you're turning. Good.
Now, the same gait analysis is being applied to people with a condition that affects the way they relate to the world around them.
There was this seminal research done by some neurologists who were doing some work in Parkinson's disease and observing children and adolescents and young adults with autism, and noted that there were striking similarities between autism and Parkinson's disease.
Children with autism have difficulties with communication and social interaction. Around 2/3 have an intellectual disability with an IQ below 70. Others can be high functioning and have average or even above average intelligence. But the majority of people with autism have problems with movement control. Chris has been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which has long been considered a milder form of autism. To analyse how his brain is processing automatic walking, the positions of reflective markers placed on his joints are recorded as he walks at various speeds. The information is processed to create a 3D model of his gait. This can be compared to the gait of children who don't have Asperger's.
So this is a typically developing child walking at their preferred pace. You can tell that the gait's smooth and coordinated.
Yeah.
As you'd expect. This young man who has high-functioning autism, what we see here is his arms, the posturing of his arms and the swinging of his arms is unusual and different from the typically developing child.
The feet also look different, is that right? Or the legs, or something about the leg movement?
Yes, so there's more variability in the lower limbs and more pelvic instability in the coordination, if you look at the pelvic region. And it's distinct from children with Asperger's disorder.
Okay, so you've got a gait of an Asperger's child here?
Yes, we'll go and have a look at that now. And what we see here is that, again, there's something unusual happening with the upper body posturing and the way he swings his arms.
In what way is that different to high-functioning autism?
What you see is not as much variability going on in the lower limbs and in the sort of pelvic area. The
pelvic area looks more stable in this one.
It's much more stable.
This finding has profound implications for understanding what's going on in the brain.
What it shows us is that the parts of the brain that are abnormal in autism and Asperger's disorder, which relate to gait function and movement control, are different. And now what we're doing is showing that there's actually empirical evidence to show that the parts of the brain that control neuromotor function are different in the two disorders, which supports the idea that clinically they're separate.
Children with Asperger's tend to get diagnosed quite late. If gait analysis can pick up their condition earlier, it may lessen some of the problems they suffer.
So if you travel through the first 10 years of your life having Asperger's but not having it diagnosed, what we find is when children with Asperger's disorder are diagnosed late, they often report they've had a lot of experience of being bullied, of feeling sad, of feeling isolated, because nobody's really understood them and they haven't understood why they're different, and that's distressing for a young person.
Last week, Dr. Norman Swan reported on Danish research that showed that taking antioxidant supplements was pretty much a waste of time. You're much better off getting your nutrition from well-prepared, healthy food. Well, this week Norman takes that good nutrition story one step further by indulging himself in the traditional goodness of a Mediterranean diet.
The Mediterranean diet was originally made famous by studies in the Greek island of Crete, whose people are amongst the longest living in the world. But it wasn't just eating the right food that mattered.
Although they ate a lot of food and a lot of olive oil, they were able to maintain a healthy body weight by doing a lot of physical work.
Eleni and Louis Canidiadis came from Greece in 1961, bringing their traditional ways to Melbourne. And nearly 50 years later, they're still tilling their own soil.
Good for your health because you turn up the soil and again, this is good exercise, plus you have a nice fresh veggies.
You try it, you go home and you see it.
And home I went. Here we are in a traditional Greek garage. Wood-fired oven, slow-cooking stove in the corner. And it's not in Thessalonica, it's actually in Coburg in Melbourne. And we also have Vasily Canidiadis here with us. Vasily, thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming.
Vasily is a TV chef who specialises in Mediterranean cooking. But what, in fact, is good for us in the Mediterranean diet? Is it the slow-cooking lamb that's been cooking for the last 10 hours? Is it growing your own food? Is it the dancing that I'm about to do later?
It's all the above, plus Mama's cooking.
That's what I suspected, but now we're going to find out. We'll join Vasily in the kitchen later, but first I met up with dietitian and researcher Dr. Catherine Itsiopoulos. She's been researching the Mediterranean diet for over a decade, and she joined me at the markets to show me what to buy.
We've got Kalamata, we've got green olives. Any difference between the two?
Only that the green olives are picked earlier. Yeah. They are a critical part of the Greek cuisine. The 10 commandments to achieve the Mediterranean diet is firstly olive oil as the main added fat. Vegetables every day and include leafy greens and tomatoes. Truss tomatoes are particularly good because they're vine ripened.
Red is a very important colour because it's often a sign of potent antioxidants called lycopenes.
Capsicum's also high and it's particularly high in vitamin C.
Another of the 10 commandments is legumes at least twice a week.
They are high in fibre, so very nutritive and almost fat-free. No day without fruit. Fish at least a couple of times a week. Whole grain breads and cereals. Meat and poultry in moderation. And nuts and dried fruit as snacks. And sweets and sweet drinks for special occasions only. And wine in moderation and with meals only. And don't get drunk.
Good health.
Now back to Vasily's kitchen. And this was an experience I'll never forget.
Now what we're making here is spanakopita. So this is the first spreading.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we add olive oil to it because we love our olive oil.
The secret of the Mediterranean diet is not just the food and not just how the food is grown, but how the food is prepared and eaten.
This has spinach, feta cheese, spring onions.
You combine a whole range of important ingredients such as olive oil and vegetables. That combination provides an optimal mix, we believe, in food-derived antioxidants that are protective for lots of chronic diseases.
Olive oil is a key component of the Mediterranean diet.
The type of fat in olive oil is monounsaturated, which is a better type of fat for prevention of heart disease compared to saturated, which comes from animal fat. The type of olive oil is important also. Extra virgin olive oil is very high in antioxidants. Then you have light olive oil, which people are choosing thinking that it's lower in fat. In fact, the fat content is exactly the same, but its antioxidant content is almost zero.
And when you cook in olive oil, antioxidants such as lycopenes in tomatoes are more readily released and absorbed by the body. Traditional Mediterranean cuisine involves a lot of slow cooking. Casseroles rich with olive oil, tomatoes, garlic, herbs and onions.
Now, by slow cooking, you're not producing advanced glycation end products or AGEs.
These end products from typical Western cooking are quite toxic to our health. So let's go around and have a look at the frying.
We believe that these ages, which are formed from the browning process of high temperature cooking, grilling, toasting, these ages may be detrimental to your health and lead to earlier ageing and chronic diseases such as heart disease and diabetes.
So that's part of the benefits of the Asian and the Mediterranean diets, is you don't get a lot of these advanced type of things.
No.
Look at that. That is fantastic. And the last factor is enjoying food as a social occasion.
Look at that.
Looks all right.
It looks all right. What are you talking about?
Looks better than all right.
It's exactly right. It's going to taste even better.
Eating slowly and savouring the flavours and company. So if you stick to all this, what are the health benefits of the Mediterranean diet?
Well, lots of studies have shown that the closer you adhere to that type of pattern of eating, the more protected you are from cardiovascular disease or heart disease, diabetes, and lots of other degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and even cancer.
So there's a Mediterranean culture, a Mediterranean lifestyle, Mediterranean cuisine, and a Mediterranean diet. It's a bundle of stuff. And the closer that you can get to this bundle, the longer you can live. So, Dalia Rexi, good appetite.
Hey Norman, it hasn't finished yet. We've got a surprise for you.
Oh no.
Come on.
Next week on Catalyst, Australia threatened by fatal forms of an ancient disease. And bosoners, be aware of the heavy metal invaders. By the way, 3 of the scientists we featured on Catalyst this year are currently being honoured by the Prime Minister at Parliament House in Canberra. And if you want to know more about the Prime Minister's prizes for science, go to our website. See you next week.
For more ABC TV vodcasts, go to the website abc.net.au/TV/video.